All right, we'll start this recording. This recording may come to some neighbors who are interested in Monument Glamping, because this is a kind of like a neighborhood conversation that I really have been encouraged to go ahead and open up, and I really want to open up because Monument Glamping is down here at the bottom of Pine Hills Ranch, Pine Hills subdivision. And I'm having a good time, but there's a lot of questions out there that I want to answer. I opened this up and on Nextdoor and invited the neighborhood to join us. And 1/3 of the people who have signed up for attending are from Pine Hills, and 2/3 are from northern El Paso County. I did invite people from outside of northern El Paso County, and no one signed up. So this is a very close neighborhood that is watching this and who has requested the recording afterwards. A total of 6 people did sign up to be here. We have one, but there's some other ones might be jumping in, and we will open it up to questions after the presentation is finished. I have 2 purposes for this community outreach. And one is to actually speak to the opposition. I am applying for a special use, and I'll get to that in a little bit, or a special use modification. And it's really cool, but there is an opposition out there that have submitted to the county, and I will have to go in front of the commissioners to kind of plead my case and have a public hearing, you might say. And then I also want to speak to people who are interested in using the property like I'm using. I'm using it in what's called a special use, and or maybe interested in glamping. And that's where I thought I'd get people from outside our community, but I really wasn't targeting them. I was targeting neighbors and saying, hey, come to this meeting, and we'll make the best of it. So this is recorded. It will be sent to neighbors and used also to I might end up inserting. I wanted to just let you know, for the person who's in the room, I want you to know that that I might be slipping in some like pictures and things like that. So I'll do some editing. I won't edit the content. It'll go from beginning to end of what we record now, the questions you ask now, the discussion we have, whatever questions neighbors have. Oh, another neighbor just joined. Good. Welcome here, Jason. Thank you for joining us. I'm just kind of explaining the what I'm doing with this recording. I might add some subtitles and things like that just to guide the viewer, because there actually one neighbor did ask for the recording, but his dad died last week and he's just not able to make it today. And he and so things like that. I will be guiding the conversation along visually and with word if needed, but I'm not going to edit anything. I'm not going to manipulate any of it. So my outline is I want to tell you what glamping, monument glamping is, what we're doing with El Paso County. I think you'll find that very interesting for the people who are in the room right now, or that 1/3 who are in that neighborhood, and then response to the opposition. And I got a stack of letters that were sent into the county. I went through all of them, highlighted things like that, and just giving kind of a line by line response, because a lot of it's not really true or accurate, and it's nice to kind of squash some assumptions that might be rumors and stuff like that, and just put them to the kibosh so we could have a more legitimate conversation about monument glamping, or about glamping in general, or any kind of special use in our community. Okay, so, and I will open up the questions after each one of those sections. Okay, so there's 3 sections, and we'll just roll with this, and more people might jump on in the time that we have. Okay, first of all, what is monument glamping? I love telling the story. I tell it all over town, and even nationally when I get into glamping groups and things like that. Monument glamping started in 2019. Now, I've been a resident here since 2000, so nearly 24 years now. And 2019, I was a teacher at a local school, and we had the summers off, and I remodeled my bedroom. And I remodeled to the studs, like took out everything, like the bathtub and everything. So Wendy and I couldn't live in our bedroom at the time. Instead of living in a living room for a month and a half, I built a platform in my backyard, and I erected my glamping tent, or I didn't even know glamping was a word at the time, but I erected my hunting tent, my wall tent. Very nice tent. I've had it in storage for years, and I just take it out every year when I go hunting. And we moved our master bedroom outdoors. We loved it. I mean, it was really nice. You guys got to try it sometime, because the kids were indoors, we were outdoors, and we were waking up with the birds chirping. It was just very, very wonderful to be outdoors. We're outdoorsy types, and we loved it. Well, after that month and a half remodel was done and we moved back inside, we decided to put the tent and all the camping gear and the bed even on Airbnb to see what would happen. And we booked out the rest of the summer. I kid you not. It was really, and it was really, really neat. We really enjoyed it. So we had this little bungalow in our backyard that people would come, and we would get to know them and visit with them as they wished. And we fell in love with the idea. So in 2 months, we hosted about 30 people on our property over the course of the 2 months, and we loved it. But the winter came and we shut everything down. The next summer, we got a little more serious and built a second tent. So I bought a new tent, built another platform, actually very identical, except it's on the other side of the property, and did the same thing. And it booked out the rest of it. Now that was a COVID year, so we didn't know if it was a fad or if it was just based on luck. People wanted to get outdoors, and campgrounds were shutting down and things like that. It was an awful year. That was 2020, but I felt like we really did a service to people, because people did enjoy the outdoors on our property, and it was fun. The third year is when I got really serious, and we ended up erecting 6 units. It was a third tent, and it was what's called a container home. It's like a tiny home built out of a container, a shipping container that my son built. He built it out of welding school, just kind of coming out of welding school, and built this neat thing. And then I partnered with my neighbor, who's now deceased, and put up a couple more containers on her property, and kind of wired into her septic and electric and stuff. And it was going great. And that's when I started to get into trouble. So that was 2021, and I got what's called, I call them yellow jackets in my front yard. They show up in the front yard wearing a yellow jacket and a badge and saying, "We're from the government. We're here to help." And they were from, well, I have a neighbor, next door neighbor to the north of us, who is adamantly against Monument Glamping, as well as anything I do, honestly. And she's got kind of that reputation in the neighborhood. And so she calls the police on a dime, and whenever we're hunting on the property, or anyway, I don't want this to turn into kind of a bashing a neighbor. It's just that's what she expects, and she has every right to do that, by the way. Everyone has the right to kind of hold the neighbors accountable based off of the regulations and the laws of our land. But anyway, all that to say, I thought I was doing something in unincorporated El Paso County. Sounds like leave me alone county, and I was fine with it. But the visits came from the building department, the planning and zoning department, the health department. Those are the 3 that really visited me. But I also got letters from the health department, the state health department. And a lot of other ones, Fish and Wildlife, things like that. Letters started coming because my neighbor was calling every jurisdiction under the sun to try to shut me down, and she didn't like it, and she was ready to try to shut it down. Now, all that to say, for 2021, 2022, and that time frame, that good full year, about maybe not quite a year, I took things very, very seriously. I got everything done. I mean, I got all my permits and started getting toward compliance, because that's really that's the buzzword, is compliance, whether you're compliant with the law or not. It's much like getting pulled over for tabs off your car or something. Well, what does a police officer do? Usually gives you a ticket or a citation or a warning, usually a warning. And then what do you got to do? You got to go down to the DMV and get your tags and do your stuff. Now it's much more complicated than that. There's all sorts of things that you need to do to get permitted to do what I'm doing, and I'll get to that in a little bit, because that involves the current dispute. But I did it. I did it in 2022. This is in July. I was issued my special use permit. And what that means is that in our building district, which is called RR5, or Rural Residential 5 Acres, is I'm able to do what's called a recreation camp with permission. And so I got permission through a special use permit, and that was awarded to me July 2022. And so now I have 8 units on my property. It consists of that same container home. I now have an RV, which is a really nice RV. It's a custom RV. And I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 safari tents and 2 bell tents. Okay, so those are my 8 units. Some are off grid, some are on grid. It gets very complicated. Like I said, the special use permit is not, for one, not an inexpensive permit. It's actually a $5,000 permit. And then a site development permit on top of that was another couple $1,000s. So there's thousands of dollars going into this operation, and getting it's not like going down to the DMV and getting a license for your car. It's like I've got to prove my occupancy level. I've got to prove how much water I'm going to do. It involves water court. I had to get a water lawyer. It involves the health department coming out and engineers coming out and making sure a septic tank is put in properly. And I had actually the health department coming out and leveling off my drainage, gravity drain level for the new septic tank and all that. That actually is not just, I kind of told you the lowball number. I mean, the septic tank alone was a $40,000 install, and then thousands of dollars on top of that for engineering and inspections and things like that. It's not a small deal. But Wendy and I love it. I mean, we absolutely love hosting people on our property. And if you've seen my property, it's beautiful. You know, we got the creek in the backyard, waterfowl flying all over the place, deer walking through, prancing and enjoying themselves. And my units are strategically placed apart from each other. So there's a lot of distance apart from each other. It's not like a campground where they're sandwiched into like sardines. And I own all the units. Nobody's driving their RVs onto my property, or they're setting up their pop-up tents or anything like that. They are structured, permitted, beautiful glamping structures and shelters that people just get to drive up. They got their own parking spot, and they enjoy themselves for a day or two. And it's wonderful. I'm and we are meeting a need. We're actually kind of popular at the Chamber of Commerce, and we get along with that area of business because we're bringing business to town. So people from Denver and Colorado Springs, kind of apartment dwellers, like to come to Monument Glamping and spend some time on the property. And then we get to know them too. Sometimes we host wine tastings. Sometimes we sit on the deck and just get to know people we would have never gotten to know before, from all areas of all backgrounds of life. And it's beautiful. We love it. And we've always been hospitable people, but in the neighborhood, as well as, we have parties at our house and stuff like that, just as residents in the neighborhood. But glamping is kind of a way for us to make money at it. We're doing well financially on this. That's really it's really become a boon for us. I mean, I get really personal here. I was a public school teacher. I had a little publishing company on the side to kind of keep that going. So I've been an educator for 30 years, and I've left education to do glamping. And it's not just for the money. It's really because it's a beautiful thing we're offering here. And we've been super host since we started on Airbnb, and it's going great. It's a great business. So, in fact, I have some neighbors who send their relatives here over the holidays, and they stay here instead of their basement. So I'm actually quite appreciated by a few neighbors. So that's kind of cool. So that's the history of Monument Glamping, and I want to go into the specific details of the modification that we're asking for. But before I do, I have 2 people, and they are both the neighbors of mine who are here in the room. And I just wanted to open it up to you guys if you have any questions about the history of Monument Glamping before we move on. Is that a negatory? I guess it's a negatory. Okay. All right. Well, we'll just keep rolling then. The here's what happened earlier this year. Oh, the last question you missed, Nathan. I asked you if you had any questions, and I paused and waited if you had any questions. Laugh out loud. No, thank you, Nathan. I don't. I wonder if the comments are going to show up in the recording. I don't know. Maybe they will. Let's just keep rolling. If you have a question, I'm going to pause after each section of the 3 sections to see if you have questions. Okay, so that was a history of Monument Glamping. You probably have heard it before because you're a couple doors down from us. But now let's talk about really the modification that I'm applying for. There was confusion in my first submittal for that special use. Now I got my special use for 8 glamping structures, and in the site development plan, they identified them as tents. Okay, so there's a disconnect between my special use and my site development, and that is what structure am I putting in? Special use says glamping sites. Okay, site development says tents. And I put in one RV in place of the tent. I asked permission for it, by the way, from the county. And the neighbor complained saying they have to be all tents. Now, a couple things on this. First of all, that neighbor did complain about the tents in the first round of my special use and wanted me to have one container home on the other side of the property that she couldn't see it. And really the RV, this next point is the RV is an upgrade. I mean, if you've seen, I'll probably slip a picture into the RV in the recording before I send this out to neighbors. It's not a piece of junk RV. It's really not a one you'd see. There's RVs parked all over our neighborhood, and people store them and things like that. Now this RV looks like a little cabin. It's like, I call it a tiny home, but it's on wheels, so it's on a chassis and a trailer. I got a good deal on it, and that's what kicked off the whole idea. Now in my mind, back in March when I installed this, so it's been almost a year that it's been up. In my mind, I was thinking this would be no big deal to the county. And why is that? Well, the county looks at sewer and water and occupation and traffic, and they look at all that stuff. And they really don't, I would think they don't care what a business does to swap out a tent for a yurt, for a hut, for a potato, whatever we want to build, a glamping structure. It doesn't matter. I'm limited to 8 units, and those 8 units have a certain impact that has been approved. Okay, and I've proven that allowance. There's criteria and everything that the county enforces, and that's what I've been allowed. So at first I didn't think that was going to be a big deal, and then I got a letter of violation from the enforcement officer in the county saying you got to either remove it or get a hold of us. Well, I got a hold of him. I said, well, what's up? I asked you about this. And sure enough, there was that disconnect between the permit and the site development. Site development wasn't quite done. There were some review questions I needed to get finished. So it became kind of I actually have some YouTube videos on glampingguy.com about how that misunderstanding came about. And I did it real time. Like, I got the letter, I did a video. I called them, I did a video. And by the third day, it was all sorted out, and I did a video on that. So it's a 3-part series on glampingguy.com. But what that led to was seeking. Okay, it's kind of like, okay, I'm sorry, I put this on my property. You thought I shouldn't, but I kind of want to. What should I do to solve this? And the planning department said, apply for a modification to your special use. At first they were saying do a new special use. And I was like, a new special use? That's a lot. They said, well, how about we just do a modification and we clarify what a glamping unit is. And I've gone through that whole special use, and that's where we're at now. Is that I've applied for the special use. That was a couple $1,000, and we sent letters out to adjacent neighbors, and what else did we have to do? It's not as big a deal as a special use, but it was still a big deal. since I'm not changing the footprint of the original special use at all, it was rather easy. So it's the same occupancy, same traffic, same light pollution, same poop, same, same just human waste, and all that stuff has been covered already in the first special use, and none of that's changing. So that's what made it easy. But what made it more difficult was actually explaining what a glamping structure is and what we intend on doing. And certain limitations the county has put on us is simply this. They said that all the structures that are down in the floodplain need to be tents. Okay, so I have 3 down there right now, and they're all tents, and they're off grid. Okay, so I can't roll a potato down there and do a glamping structure down by the creek. Not that I really want to, but anyway, okay, cool. But the other 5 structures are I want the liberty to put what I want in there. That's the disagreement that I have with a number of neighbors. I'll get to the neighborhood opposition in a little bit. Because that's the nature of glamping, honestly, you guys. I mean, right now, this is what I have. I have 2 beautiful safari tents. One has some wood accents to it, and a nice rain fly over it with a little privacy room behind it, where they put a tub and a grill and a little table, and they have a private bathroom, things like that. So this isn't your typical pop-up. These are very, very nice, and I'll probably keep those there. But for the most part, they have the foundation, they have the plumbing, they have the electric. They're set to go for me to put. There's these neat spherical huts that in the future, maybe I'll put that there. Maybe put an A-frame or just I don't know. I don't know. That's the point. I don't know, and because the tents do wear down, there will be a time when I have to swap the structure out. And what I don't want to do is go to the county every single time I want to swap that out. I've done the due diligence with plumbing and all that stuff, the criteria. Why do I have to apply again unless it's like an increase in units? If I wanted all of a sudden 20 units, that would justify a new special use or a modification. But please don't make me do that every single time I want to make a swap of a venue, because that's actually what that RV was. The RV, which arguably is an upgrade from a tent. I had a tent there, and now I have this cabin-looking RV, and it's cool, and it does the exact same thing the tent did, except it's warmer. People are able to go indoors a bit instead of hang out outdoors, and that's that. So that even though it's an improvement, people are against it. And that'll get to the opposition. So that's in a nutshell. I'm not yet scheduled on the calendar for a public meeting, but it probably will be in February. And that means I go to the Planning Commission and I make my case, the case I pretty much made to you now, as well as to the Board of County Commissioners. And then they say yay or nay. They say, cool, we like Monument Glamping, you go Jube, or they say, no, we don't like what you're doing and we're going to turn you down. And then it actually does not shut me down as far as the glamping operation. It just goes back to 8 tents. And then I'd have to remove that RV, and it would be an expense to me. It would be a hassle. I'd have to get rid of my container, and I'd have to go to 8 tents. And tents don't, quite honestly, tents do not go as well as those little tiny homes. The premium tents go well, but the ones down at the creek don't, and those are and that's just the reality of the business. The business helmet I put on is like, how can I increase occupancy as much as I can for the highest price possible, and still run things smoothly. That's the marketing tension that I deal with as a business owner, and frankly, these commissioners right now, the commissioners right now do favor businesses. They favor development, honestly. And I'm a little guy. I'm not a big developer. I mean, the big developers across my creek putting up these, $500,000 houses. I'm just trying to do a special use, which is allowed in our county. So that's kind of it. Do you guys have any questions before I go on to the opposition? I think Nathan, you just texted me a question. How about you go ahead and ask it? Are you still having trouble with your audio? Well, it came through text, so I'm just going to go ahead and rephrase what you just sent me. Saying apparently you just got a notification from the county, and that there is a meeting coming up, and it probably said January and February. That kind of goes into a deeper story. I'm actually hiring a legal outfit to okay, January 9th and February 18th. That's going to be kicked into 2 more meetings. It's going to be, the can's going to kick down. That kind of goes into the weeds a little bit, but let me explain to you for the sake of my neighbors and things like that. We're going to ask for an extension, which is going to be allowed, and I'm hiring a big legal outfit to represent me. It's costing me a lot of money, but I feel like this is very important to me. This is my livelihood. This, I mean, really, if I were to submit to the 8/10ths and no unique structures, it would cost me tens of thousands of dollars in the long run, just on occupancy and how much we can charge and things like that. And to me, it's unnecessary. So I'm gonna fight it, you might say, and push it and try to get it. And I'm very, very confident that I will, especially with this legal team that's coming on. So anyway, I hope that answers your question. But I'm glad to know that you got notice from Ashland already. So February 8th at 9 a.m. Okay. The Boulder County Commission meeting. Okay. I think that's got to be changed, but it'll be changed here in the next week, and you'll probably get notice of that too. All right. Good questions. Good active neighbors. I wish more neighbors were here actually, but we've got 2. Let me go into the opposition. Actually, we've got 3 letters of support, and I suspect we're going to get more after this recording is done. I should note, I had a lot of support my first time through, and that's because I was actually knocking on doors and talking to people. Okay, I didn't quite do that this time. Nathan, you just asked about where you can get that. Yeah, you can go to EDARP and actually do it. In fact, I'll probably put that in the subtitle so people can actually go see these letters. And but anyway, what was I saying? The first time through, I did go and actively seek support because I believe neighbors should support me. I really believe they should. In fact, before I go into the opposition letters, let me explain this. The special use permit. Okay. If you go to the county website, I'll slip this in as a screenshot, because if you go to this, if you go to the county website, you can see all the different subsets or the districts that we live in. Okay, and there's 3 main districts. There's agriculture, there's residential, and there's commercial. Okay, and so everything that's planned in the county to build either falls into one of those subsets. You're allowed to do pretty much whatever you want out in agricultural land, and there's actually a few different subsets of that. And you're very restrictive with commercial, of course. You know, if you're building a gas station in the middle of a residential neighborhood, you won't be allowed to do that. But it is allowed in some places. And then there's residential, and residential is the most diverse district group of all of them. There's like a dozen of them. I don't even know how many there are. And our district is what's called Rural Residential 5, RR5, and that is the closest to agricultural as you can get. Okay, so there's all sorts of, townhomes, apartment buildings are way down here, the closest to commercial as possible. But we're at the exact opposite spectrum. Okay, so all of us in our neighborhood bought into it, knowing full well we were out and really close to the country, close to agricultural as you can get, but still residential. We still have single family units out here, and that's what we have. Now, that said, there are a lot of allowances in that RR5 district. Okay, if you go down, I'll put a link into the website. I think it's fascinating. I didn't know this, by the way, and most of my neighbors don't know this. We don't buy a house and we are told that there's all sorts of things we can do with our property. It comes up when we try to do things with our property. There's a whole list of things you could do, and one of those things you can do on your property is what's called a recreation camp. And if I wanted to host Boy Scouts here every summer and have a recreation camp, and, I don't know, do whatever Boy Scouts do, camp, I could do it. I could get a special use for those kinds of things. In fact, there is right up the road a autism camp that is off of Arnold, and they actually host they have a couple yurts in their backyard, and they do a camp for autism kids. It's beautiful. It's wonderful. It's a wonderful use of their property. Okay. And that's my appeal to my neighbors, honestly, is that it's common for kind of the NIMBY types, the not in my backyard types, to stand up against developments like the development that's going on across my creek, Willow Springs. We, as a neighborhood, Pine Hills neighborhood, years and years ago, stood up against the Forest Lakes development that is now in, and now these $1 million homes are right there bordering our property. And there is a sprawl that's coming into our rural residential property that they are appealing to try to build more. Okay. However, we in our rural residential properties have rights to do what we want to do on our bigger pieces of property. And I feel like I have got a handful of neighbors who are shooting me for doing what I should be able to do. Okay. Now my neighbor has, I might put a picture up here because it's a very good picture. People confuse me for my neighbor who's opposing my glamping operation because she has a beautiful agricultural, well, I don't know if it's that beautiful, but an agricultural operation going on her property. And she has every right to do so because in that RR5, she can do that. Okay. People confuse my property with her property because there's tents all over her yard. She has garden beds all over her yard. These white, they look like little stagecoaches. Okay. Okay, my tents are more subtle. They're kind of hidden a little bit. Some are out in the open, some are not. It's hard. You can't count all 8 from any angle of my property. So I've got trees and things like that, the creek and all that. So you really have to look for them. But hers they're all over the place. But she has every right to do that. And you know what? Me as a neighbor, I will stand up and I will defend her right to do that, even though she doesn't want me to exist. But that's why, because I think we shouldn't surrender our right to do things just because a neighbor doesn't like it. We looking over the fence and saying, I don't want to see that is not a reason to take it away. And that's how this, I think we should lock arms to support one another, not lock arms to take each other out. And that's what's happening here. I will get to, let's see, Josh Burning, he lives across the creek. He's not here right now, but he wrote a letter of support of Monument Glamping. In the past 3 years, it's actually been 5, but I don't consider the first couple years as really open because I was more experimenting. But in the past 3 years, it has not affected me. I have not noticed any noise issues or general trouble whatsoever. That's just a highlight out of his letter. And he is the only one that has a panoramic view of my whole property because he lives across the creek, not next door. Next door is kind of too close. He can't see my whole property, but he can. And he's in support of our special use. Jason, who's here in the meeting, reading most of the opposition letters written by our neighbors. Thank you for reading them, by the way, Jason. It appears most of them have not spoken to Chris, which is disappointing. I've only spoken to one opposition leader. And he's the one who wasn't able to make it today. But I think I'm going to convince him. If he's watching this video right now, I think he's kind of coming to the right side. So we'll see about that, honestly. And then this one is from Nathan and Melissa down the road. The impact of travel on the road has not been overwhelming or a problem. And actually, it impacts you probably the most, Nathan, because you're right there at the corner. So you see all the traffic coming in and out of Monument Glamping, and it's not been overwhelming or a problem. As ones who are often outside working on or around our own property, we have personally observed the gleeful laughter of excitement and peaceful serenity of individuals enjoying the nature surrounding them while partaking in the glamping experience. I almost choked up when I read that. We are in support of Chris and Wendy's request to change their already approved 8 units to broader label of glamping sites, not just tents, etc. So that's great. Thank you, Nathan, for doing that. And I plan on getting more letters for that. So, the thing is that the reason I'm hosting this meeting and I'm making this recording and I'm really encouraging my opposition to watch it is because I don't think this should be a dualistic thing. I really think it should be an opportunity for neighbors to express concerns so that I can build a better recreation camp on my property. Okay. If it's a heck no, not my backyard type of thing, well, then I don't get to really consider your opinions. If I could go back to my first special use, I actually did make some changes to my site development because of neighborhood quote unquote complaints. They weren't grumpy neighbors, but they were just legitimate concerns. One example is a lady who lives just at the end of Rickenbacker. Not you, Nathan, but up the road. I'm not going to use her name because she's not here and stuff. But she has asthma, and she was concerned about traffic. The dust whipping up. Well, we had a traffic study done, particularly for. I had to get that anyway. But she also brought up wood fires and said wood fires is a concern for me for fire mitigation as well as her asthma stuff. And I actually made the change to go to straight propane. All my tents are straight propane fire pits, and they're as safe as water. I mean, it's like so it turned out to be very, 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 very good. Okay. Now I have a stack of letters. I didn't quite count them. I think there's 12 or 13. And I just want to go through them and talk about what they said in the letter, because I read all of them. And then some of them are very easily rebutted. It doesn't take too much to say, no, that ain't true, and just go on. And it's based off of the main letter that came from Arlene Hinton right next door. Maybe I should start with that one. I have notes on that one, but how should I do this? Yeah, maybe I should start with that one. Let me start with Arlene's. Arlene's is very long, and I have 6 point. I kind of boiled them down to 6 points. I mean, she kind of unloads, and she's that kind of person. During the first special use permit, Arlene did show up to a meeting with the county, and I think that's why the county eventually administratively approved it, because she took the podium and came unglued. I mean, really, veins were popping out of her eyes. She was yelling and screaming, and it was really bad. and I think everyone said, okay, this is the leader of the opposition. And actually everyone stepped away from her and dropped their opposition. Because like the lady up the road, she was at that meeting. She was concerned about traffic and smoke. And I listened to her. I resolved it. So problem solved. And next, and there was no next other than Arlene. And Arlene, we have a long history with of just being difficult. So I summed up her thing, and she made the following 6 claims. First, the claim that home values will go down because of monument glamping, and there's just no substance for this claim. In fact, especially for the modification changes nothing as far as impact goes. So I will still continue with my glamping operation. But in fact, the argument can be made that her value will go up. The value of my property is going up with the special use, not down. And if I sell with my special use, I'm going to get more money than if I sold without it. So that's how values are property. It's a claim with no substance to it. Her second claim is that my tents are cheap and used. The opposite's true. I mean, they're beautiful tents. They're the Davis tents out of Denver and White Duck tents. They're the top of the line. They're using glamping all over the world, and that they're not the cheap pop-up tents you find in campgrounds. Claim that the lawn is unkept, fires are made, low lives will occupy my tents. She actually said that in her letter. Some being my own children. I know my children don't live in my tents. For one, a couple people copied that or mimicked that. That's not true. They're not low lives. They actually pay a lot of money to stay in my tents. So I'm making some good money over here. And I'm surprised not more people are doing glamping, because it's a nice business and they pay top dollar. These aren't homeless people living in tents. It's not a homeless shelter. And I've already mentioned fires, and the lawn is capped. And she claimed that I haven't mowed it in 20 years, and I do keep some spots unmowed. And anyway, that's just not true. Claims that RVs are worse than tents. Now, this is interesting because Mrs. Hinton argued against tents the first time through a special use process, and now she's arguing for it. Besides, we argue that nicer structures are available in the glamping world. The glamping world is pretty broad. There's actually trade shows of glamping that I go to, and I actually speak at them too. And they are mostly great improvements from tents, which is why we're applying for the modification. We want to have the coolest glamping site in the world. Okay, we want to have it really cool. I want my neighbors to be proud of having it. And yeah, like I said earlier, their relatives come to town, go ahead and go down and stay at Monument Glamping, not my basement. And then the claims that Monument Glamping would resemble a trailer park. She said that. She said the same thing in the original special use. She said it would resemble a campground. Trailer parks and campgrounds are totally different from what a recreation camp is. This subset in our county is allowed, and it just won't end up that way. Neither of those things are true. The campground or RV parks, no, absolutely not. And then she claims at the end that I lied to the police officers on a neighborhood dispute. Miss Hinton has reached out to the police several times in my 23 years of being her neighbor, including inciting my children for playing at the creek, planting her gardens on my property, no lie, hunting ducks. She claimed my 12-year-old was an active shooter. We were duck hunting down at the creek, and much more. The police have never written a ticket or made a citation of me, and rather siding with my responses every time, because they're fabricated over there, and it's more reasonable over here. So, and all I have to say, if Mrs. Hinton would change her tune and become more hospitable and pleasurable and more supportive, I would welcome her with open arms. There's water under the bridge, but that's the kind of neighbor that I'm dealing with. As far as the other ones, here's one. Now, these are all public information that you can download these on the county website and actually see the letters of opposition. But a lot of them, what Arlene has done is she has sent out hundreds of letters to everybody in Pine Hills. Okay, so everybody got this copy, and I got about a dozen sending letters in, and they raise some interesting points, but for the most part, Arlene really did a good job soliciting her neighbors to be against Monument Glamping. And remind you, this is against the modification to my already existing special use. Okay, so it's not against Monument Glamping. Okay, and all the opposition is kind of null and void. If all they get up and say, I'm against Monument Glamping, it doesn't matter. Monument Glamping has already been approved. Okay, so here's one from down the road. John Doran says, not business lots or multiple dwellings. He said that's not what RR5 should be. Actually, I've already shown that. Yes, it is allowed. It is a special use. Here's one from Gogwin. They do not want an RV camp. So that's, again, mimicking what Arlene said. It's not an RV camp. It's a glamping camp. Zoned rural residential and not, okay, this one is from Thomas Eastburn on Spats. We're zoned rural residential and not in a business aspect as stated. Well, it's a special use of a rural residential property. It is allowed. The zoning does not include a camping business. Well, that's not true. It's not a camping business. It's a glamping business. It's a recreation camp, and it is allowed. This is from Mike and Debbie Buttenweiser, who live up on Spats, and I've talked with them, Mike, before too, in the first time around. So he was at that meeting that's where he kind of stepped away from Arlene, I think. So the addition of tiny house structure rentals and/or RV site rentals to the neighborhood would take away some of our feelings of safety and security we feel in our home. More of the negative aspects of the city, noise, and traffic to our rural community. So he's concerned about that. He was concerned about that in the first time around too. And now, as far as traffic goes, this is going to be actually very interesting. The first time we went through this, we didn't have the Willow Springs community. All the traffic is coming through Willow Springs now and coming up by your house, Nathan. Okay, Jason doesn't see the clamping operation. He's up Spats across the street from Mike, and so the arguments for traffic is more of a case that you could make, Nathan, but not Mike. I mean, he's seeing none of my cars, so that's a moot point. Steve Phillips, he's actually who couldn't be here because his father passed away. And you know what? The thing is that even though these neighbors are against this, I hope we become good neighbors. I'm gonna win this, you guys. I'm gonna win this, but I still love and respect Steve and Leah and his family, and I really feel bad that he's not here. And that same goes for other opposition. So anyway, that's just being a good neighbor, I think. Okay, the tents are fairly unobtrusive, but I believe the modifications they are applying for will not be as unobtrusive, especially to the neighbors just to the north of them. He's sympathizing with Arlene. He's saying that I'm actually increasing to a total of 12, and that's just not true. It's 8. It's not, the numbers are not changing. Of these types of units, cabins and tiny homes, I do not believe is in the best interest of the residential community. Now, I spent 2 hours talking to Steve on my back deck. I think after he submitted this, so his opinion might change. Carol Lynch up the road on Spats. I like Carol. She came and visited the RV back at my ribbon cutting ceremony. And so replacing tents with RVs or campers will essentially change the property into a trailer park. And that I just disagree. It's not a trailer park. It's still a recreation camp. Trailer parks, man, they're sandwiched in there like sardines. I mean, it's like I've been to trailer parks. I'm not even going to be close to that. Okay. And none of my RVs are going to look like RVs. Okay. They're going to look cool. So that's the way I'm building it. Dale Heibel on Spats Road. It will result in a for-profit business that seems to be further from the original R5 residential rules only district. He uses for-profit a couple of times, like he's offended that I'm making money on it, but I'm not offended that I'm making money on it. So I'm making good money on it. This could subsequently result in an increase to external traffic in the Pine Hills subdivision, and the traffic is not up there. Might be increased crime and resident safety. Really, the people who are signing up for this, they're paying top dollar. They're paying, I was making $200 to $300 a night for a tent over like 4th of July. So that's peak season. Of course, I don't charge that now because it's cold out. We had a blizzard yesterday, but but all that to say, we don't get miscreants as guests. We get very very high-end people, and oh, this is a good point. And if there's ever a miscreant who ends up on my property, guess what? I'm right here in the house. Okay, I'll be on it. As if there is, but in 5 years there's not, and that's because guess who would call the police if there was? It'd be Arlene. She'd call the police in a snap, and that she has never called the police since day one of the glamping operation. Actually, no, that's not true. She did call the police that second year. So she called everybody, but she reached a dead end when it came to the criminal allegations that she was making. Here's one from Joe Martinez. He actually wants clarification. I would like to know what non-tent structures he plans to install. He says he's objecting to it, but he really just wants to know. So I might just walk down there and talk with him because, all right, I will send this video to him, even though he didn't ask for it. I think I might just send it to him because he asked for it in the letter. And Chris Gigley's is really long. It's a 4-page letter. My personal experience with the Jube family and their ambitions goes back a time when they had no approval for anything, but were still operating a business. In fact, Jason, you were in this group. Jason, Chris, and I and our wives would get together. This was a few years ago. Gosh, how time flies! But when I would like I mentioned, when I was going way back to when I was getting into trouble, and I just didn't know I was in trouble. I was trying to comply, didn't know how. Jason, Chris, and I got together, and we would kind of compare notes and say, "Oh, Jason was doing an Airbnb in his basement, and Chris he bought a tiny home. Tiny home looked beautiful and huge, and he was trying to do the same thing, and I was doing things with tents, and we were all trying to figure out the county codes, what was allowed, what wasn't allowed, what can we appeal, who can we hire to help us, and those meetings were very, very helpful to me. I chose Jason went the Airbnb route. I went the recreation camp route that I've already explained, and Chris went the variance route, and he didn't succeed. I think he could have won it, and I would have stood up for him too. So he went. There's a thing in the county called a planning meeting that you have with the planners, and they kind of call in the bubbleheads, and we all kind of talk about how this can work or how it can't work. And then my meeting turned out to be very good. They kind of created the path and showed me what a recreation camp is and the code and this and that and what I have to do. And it was a very good meeting, and it's actually live on eDARP. You can actually watch it if you want to sit through an hour long of bureaucrats talking. But his meeting didn't go that well. He was applying for what's called a variance, which is an exception to the code. You're actually asking to be allowed to do something the code doesn't allow. There's the difference, and he didn't succeed, and he kind of threw up his arms and gave up and sold his tiny home and said, forget it. So when I moved my RV into place, he's taking the stance of, well, not allowed for me, shouldn't be allowed for him. That's basically his 4 pages. And he's claiming he knows the inside scoop of me. Honestly, he's claiming that I'm lying. I'm not lying. This is the history that I've just explained is very accurate, and that's why I'm going to win. I'm going to win this modification, and I will have the modification. I will have the 3 tents down at the creek. I will have 5 units that I have the liberty to go beyond tents and still have glamping structures, same impact, same traffic, same lights, same poop, same everything, same water. Those are the important things. Yeah, it's kind of like water, septic, and traffic are kind of the biggies. But they might be domes. It might be a hut. I don't know yet. That's the nature of glamping, is to be flexible with your structures. Yeah. And that's and I'm gonna get it, but it's just too bad we got to resort to this stuff about it. So anyway, so that's the history of Monument Glamping. So if you've made it, this is actually being recorded, and it's it's still being recorded, right? Yeah, the recording will be. It's still recording. Okay. Well, anyway, it's recorded. It will be seen. If you made it through this far, I hope this convinces you that Monument Glamping is not only a cool thing in the neighborhood, but it's also something that is very legal, very safe, and allowed. And so we're going to go to commission, and we're going to go to the Board of County Commissioners, and I think they're going to love my presentation. I'm hiring a firm to actually present with me, so they're tying up any loose ends that I might see, because I'm a novice in this. I'm just a landowner. I'm one of you. I'm out here in rural center property, trying to live off the fruit of the land, as John Steinbeck would say, and trying to do the best he can with the property that I have. We got a beautiful piece of property. The creek runs through it. We have choke cherries and Austin, and we don't have gardens like you do, Nathan, but we have we do. We just live off the fruit of the land. We try to make the best out of our 5 acres as we can. And recreation camp is, like I said before, is one of many things that can be done, and I'm happy to be a part of the community doing it. So that's why I'm going to send this to people so that they can look through it, and maybe even, and I suspect I will get more letters of support than letters of opposition. So that's where we're at. I guess that ends the presentation. So I'm going to open it up to my 2 people who showed up, of all the people who signed up, but they're going to get recordings. But go ahead and thanks for doing this session, Chris, and for inviting the neighbors to encourage you directly. Well, you're welcome, Jason. You're welcome. And Nathan, do you have anything to say or type out? And if you have any questions, Jason, I would appreciate them, and that would add to the discussion here in the community.
I don't have any more questions. I feel like you've kept us all up to speed if we're willing to actually engage with you and hear from you and Wendy. So largely, I didn't learn anything much new in this. And I believe we've had opportunity to, like you said, with some of the letters of support and opposition, to fine tune from a neighbor perspective what you are attempting to do. So thank you for that, and I applaud that, and I support businesses in our area, and I'm glad you're making a profit off of it, and you're trying to be respectful to the neighborhood at the same time. So I appreciate being able to sit in on this session.
Bravo, Nathan. That's a. I'm very thankful for that summary, because that's honestly what I'm trying to do here. I would like to see more neighborhood conversations that go on, because it's going to help me make a better Monument Glamping property, and just be awesome. So that's it. Nathan,
well, Chris, yeah. Well, just like I wrote there in the comment section, and it does look like those comments will be recorded also.
Good.
So anything that you can put in there, I know just hearing from some other neighbors, how involved we are with the community, both very locally, Pine Hills and the greater Tri-Lakes area. So we know lots of people, obviously, and get to hear feedback from different places of both support or questions or opposition. So I think any kind of information to present as much transparency as possible would be helpful to those that maybe are unsure or have been given maybe information that that may be untrue or isn't clear enough. So obviously some of those opposition letters state a lot of things, and some of it is just, it's difficult to find clear information on county websites. It took me a bit of digging, and not everyone is necessarily as tech savvy. So the building department, if you know how to use it, there's lots of information that can be had. There's lots of information on the county sites, but you have to know how to navigate through them. So anything you could do to, especially for some of those neighbors that don't have the means or the know-how to get to that, could probably make a lot of people at ease. And then the other part that I wanted to bring up, just so that it's on this recording, because of knowing people, is obviously we know Georgia's property next to you was sold, and we know that it's looking to be developed. And as recently as this past week, I've heard even more information that there may not be a whole lot we can even do as a community to stop them from moving forward. And as I've told many people, including the neighbor between us and many other neighbors, that my biggest concern for our neighborhood is that 39 plus acre property being turned into 130 homes, as I've most recently heard. And the information I was told, Jason, obviously you guys would have been most affected by this, but when Forest Lakes was developed and Classic agreed to put up larger lots on the north end of their property to kind of be a buffer zone, that if I understand correctly from what I've been told, they weren't required to do that. That's something that they did to help move their process along more quickly and have some support from the Pine Hills neighborhood. And they did, a cost analysis and said, you know what, if we can make them happier at the end, the money makes more sense to build less houses, but get this done quicker. Right. Yep. And so whether the new owner of George's property wants to be that kind and build a buffer zone when he goes to build or not, from what I've been told recently, there's not a whole lot we can say. And unfortunately, the way that the planning codes are written in the town of Monument at this time, so unless they change here soon, they can annex themselves without much opposition at all, even if the Board of Trustees says, yeah, we don't want to. If they meet all of the current criteria that exists in the town code, they have to be given that right. Otherwise, they can sue the individuals. And obviously, no individual trustee wants to be held liable to them. Yep. So that's my biggest concern. Obviously, the amount of traffic that comes from glampers that goes right by our house is very minimal. And you can't tell whether it's a glamper coming or just a friend of a neighbor, right? Yeah. Yeah. And like I wrote on here, there's a few neighbors that live up, I think, on Spats that drive way too fast for our neighborhood, especially coming into a sharp 90-degree turn. So that's been our issues. And, I think the one glamper that had a guest that was driving a little too fast, you addressed. So I appreciate that. And,
glad you mentioned that, because that's an example of kind of like we're here, we're boots on the ground. I mean, it's not like they can't just throw a party on our property and it's not possible because we're right here at the house. And so that makes it that's the spirit of a recreation camp. They're not telling you to replace the single family unit with a business. It's a single family unit is actually operating a business. And that's the differentiation.
Right. And as you and I have discussed before, there's certain codes and whatnot that maybe can be changed if there's enough of us that want to see things changed. So just because there's a rule or a law or a code in place right now, it doesn't mean that it has to stay in place. Some of them don't make a lot of common sense. And so an argument of, well, it's a rule as a rule isn't necessarily a great argument, but
rules are meant to be broken. That's what my 7th grade kids used to always say. Drive me nuts as a teacher, but I kind of, that's how things do change. So for the better, there's things that do need to change for the better. That's actually, Jason, back when we were in our group, we actually talked about the kinds of codes that we were under, but should be changed. Honestly, this is old code. Oh, and you know what? Here's a little bit of backroom information. I don't mind it being recorded, but I'm going to be hiring a law firm that is that actually helped write the county code, and and it's quite exciting. I'll share that off. That might be too much information for my opposition, but all I have to say, it is way too easy to show up in a meeting about a community meeting and voice your opposition, but it's very difficult to get commissioners to take away the rights of landowners. For one, a landowner can sue the county. If I bought a piece of property, I'm allowed to do something and you're taking it away. That's exactly what in Georgia's land. There I could see the conversation happening between lawyers, the town lawyer and the developer lawyer saying, sorry, we bought the property with full intent to use the land like I am allowed. And that's where that gets into litigation. So anyway, for what I'm trying to do, I mean, I'm not going to sue the county, but the commissioners know that kind of those legal inherent barriers, and they know it very, very well. I've been to meetings. I write for the community newspaper. I kind of get it, and I understand that they do have their rules and regulations and laws and all that stuff for good reason. And that's to protect landowners' rights, not to take them away, but to protect them. Say, look, this is the box you can operate in. Go and operate. And if you're outside that box, it becomes an issue. And you know what? I am way in that box. I have a permit, and I'm legitimately trying to run a business. Now, a board can be difficult on a business. They can set rules. They could put conditions on a business, but that's not this. This Board of County Commissioners is actually pro-business. They don't get into putting conditions on that are unreasonable. So some of the conditions that were kind of in the in maybe my opposition, or especially Arlene's letter, they're not going to go for that. And I know that because I know them better. I think Arlene does. So that's it. All right. Well, that's it. So it's been just about an hour. Thank you, Jason and Nathan, for showing up. The 4 others who have signed up but didn't show up, but we'll make sure they get the recording. And I will also publish this somehow, some way, so that everybody in Pine Hills, especially, can see the value of Monument Glamping and what it brings to the community, but then also how that opposition should be really mitigated, kind of to turn the volume down a bit and get more real. And I'd love to hear from you with genuine concerns. I would love to hear from any neighbor who does, and will engage in the dialogue that Jason was talking about, like I already had. So, all right. Thank you, everybody. I'm Chris Jube, owner of Monument Glamping down here at the edge of Pine Hills subdivision. I will stop the recording.